All men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear.
Make America great again.
The Big Mig.
Welcome back to the Big Mig Show. I'm your host, Lance Migliaccio, with my co-host, George Ballantine. It's rise and grind, tip of the spear, because, of course, it's better to be hurt by the truth than comforted with a lie. George B., what's up, man? You got an unstoppable shirt on.
I'm feeling unstoppable today. I don't know why. You know what? I was having a great conversation with this guy named George, but he really goes by G. Edward Griffin. I don't know. I'm just feeling it today.
Are you? We got now.
You know what, Lance?
If I double teamed here, I got two Georges to deal
Lance,
with.
if I have that man's drive and energy when I'm at his age, I would be a happy person, I think, too.
Yeah.
I got to say, really, like, amazing.
No doubt about it. I mean, he's authored so many books, and
I need his secret
got another
sauce.
one in the works. We might get a chance to talk about it. Maybe he'll leak a little bit of the information on the show today.
I wonder if
we'll try to drag it out of him.
I wonder if it's the California weather doing it.
God,
can't be the politics over there. They'd kill you, but I don't know. He's got to have some secret. Maybe he got something from Jekyll Island he's not telling us. We're gonna find out, though. I'm telling you.
Yeah, you never know what the true science is. People may not give away their best kept secrets. We're taken to the grave, guys, sometimes. But at the end of the day, listen, you guys know the drill. Thumbs up, comment, share, subscribe, hit the follow button. If you never want to miss a great interview or anything else we do on this show, that's how you get notifications. If you can do the paid subscription, fantastic. Rumble Rant tips are always appreciated. And of course, if you can support Rumble with Rumble Premium, that's Rumble Premium with Perplexity. Even if you use AI and you're paying for Perplexity, you might as well get Rumble Premium for free. Maybe rethink how you're paying for your subscription, cancel your straight Perplexity subscription, and subscribe with Rumble. And of course, we've got our Rumble Wallet connected. We take tips in crypto. Not only we have this show, but we have the #1 crypto show on Rumble, the Crypto Power Hour. That show is 7 a.m. on Wednesdays and 7 a.m. on Fridays. If you didn't catch the interview on Wednesday, I would tell you, go back, check it out. You might have missed a really good interview because I think it really was enlightening. Evgeny came on, and of course, Evgeny Mitkov. He's always really interesting as far as a guest. Listen, let's give a shout out. If you'd like to sponsor the Big Mig Show, you know how to do it. You hit us over at info@thebigmig.com. Diversification's key in any portfolio. This isn't financial advice, but this is the Prepper Bar, the 62.2 gram Prepper Bar, perforated and easily broken down to your choice of 3 different denominations. You can see when I tilt the bar there, you can see there's a small, a medium, and large. You can just break off a small piece to make a payment. Of course, you don't want to have to walk around with a 1 ounce token and a pair of tin snips. With the way the Federal Reserve has got us, we're $40 trillion in debt, paying $1 trillion in interest, of course, to an entity that I've never spoken positively about. I don't even know why we haven't. We'll find out more details why during today's show. But head over for diversification, asset protection from inflation, economic turmoil, or in the case of the Prepper Bar, it's very unique utility for barter and trade. Makes a perfect gift. At these prices, there isn't anybody that's not going to like a gift of gold and silver. I still have gold and silver from when I was a child. My dad gave me. I'll be passing on my daughter, unless, of course, I need it. You never know. Have a backup plan, thebigmigbar.com. That's right, thebigmigbar.com. George makes it easy if you don't want to remember that URL. Just take a snapshot of that QR code, but go there after the show. You're not going to want to miss it in a minute of this interview. Or you can call them at 888-526-7154, 888-526-7154, thebigmigbar.com.
Whoa, wrong one.
Break me off a piece of that Prepper Bar.
For a minute there, George, I thought you were going to become a hip-hop artist. I didn't know if you changed the jingle.
I don't know what I did either.
All right, listen, unless you've been living under a rock, if you've been, lifting your game, reading the books that are necessary to kind of really understand the complexity of our government, we talk about it. Listen, on this show, we go after everybody. We don't play favorites. I've always thought that the party system was the David Copperfield, the uniparty in D.C., It's not government for the people, by the people. And that includes our banking system. Probably one of the earliest, if not the earliest person to ever out the Federal Reserve Bank. I received this book. I got a used copy as a gift. Somebody said to me, have you ever read The Creature from Jekyll Island? I had no idea what they were talking about. I thought the Federal Reserve was actually a federal institution. But of course, there's nothing federal or reserve about it. I'd been tricked like many other Americans. Edward Griffin. I got to say that it's not often that I say I'm a fan. I don't know if I've ever said it on the show, but I'm a fan of this guy. Extremely intelligent, highly articulate. He's written multiple books, and we're going to maybe even get a chance to hear about his new one, as I mentioned earlier. But this book is I don't want to say a cult classic, but when it comes to understanding the nefarious nature of different agencies that our government, of course, the IRS is one of them, and the Federal Reserve is one of them, and there are many others. This one really outs it. He was way ahead of the curve. He's backstage. I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get him in here because his time is extremely valuable, and he's a super busy guy, and I'm very thankful for him joining us the show today. And I think the audience is super excited about him being here. So let's go, George.
All right, shut up. Welcome to the Big Show, Edward Griffin. How you doing?
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. I like that build-up. It just makes me feel important, you know?
Well, you are important.
Well, better to be important than impotent.
Listen, hold on, Lance. I'm going to tell you how important you are because you outed the government way back when you wrote that book, and you're still here with us. It's got to mean something, man. A lot of people died. They disappeared and stuff. So,
and really an extremely powerful institution and powerfully controlled. Let me give the audience just a little bit of additional background. I've got a bio here I grabbed offline. I didn't grab all of it because your bio goes on and on and on. You're so accomplished, but you're a writer, a documentary film producer, founder of Freedom Force International, listed in the Who's Who in America. You're well known because of your talent for researching difficult topics, and I think that's an understatement, and presenting them in clear terms that all can understand. You've dealt with diverse subjects such as archaeology and ancient Earth history, the Federal Reserve System, international banking, terrorism, internal subversion, the history of taxation, U.S. foreign policy, the science and politics of cancer therapy, the Supreme Court, and the United Nations. If that hasn't put you on a top hit list for the deep state, as George said, I'm impressed that they haven't tried to have Hillary Clinton track you down somewhere, because she's got a long list of suiciding people. But you got a bunch of books. It's not just The Creature from Jekyll Island, World Without Cancer, The Discovery of Noah's Ark, Moles in High Places, Open Gates of Troy, No Place to Hide, The Capitalist Conspiracy, More Deadly Than War, Grand Design, The Great Prison Break, and The Fearful Master. And I know you're working on another book, and hopefully we'll get into a little detail. Maybe you can throw some shreds out, chum the water for our audience and get them excited about what you're coming out with. But I want to jump right in here. Your first book was a Second Look at the United Nations, I think, in 1964. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
I'm not a fan of the United Nations. I've often said that they're lucky I'm not president. I would have thrown them out of New York. What made you pick them? And I guess really the question is, you must have had somewhat of an epiphany moment somewhere along the way, because outing major, what do I call these? Major narratives that have been used to manipulate the public's persona, or at least the public's, knowledge base. What made you go down this? What started you on this path? Because, of course, being a truth teller is not an easy path.
No, it's hard to answer that question, Lance. How did I get involved in this racket of telling the truth? It's a specialty, isn't it? It's not pursued by a lot of public officials, that's for sure. And it's hard to really answer the question because it was no one thing. Like most of us, we go through life taking little steps at a time. Neither one seems to be particularly significant in itself. But when you turn around and look back at your trail, it was a long, winding trail. And my gosh, you would never have guessed that you wound up, because that's not where you were headed. So to make a long story short, I was just a guy that went to school. I was lucky in that I was raised by an old maid school teacher aunt. Unfortunately, I came from a broken family. It was a very sad situation, but I was lucky because at about the age of, I think it was about 9 or 10, I was pretty much rescued by my aunt and my grandmother and taken out of that environment. And I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and lived on the east side of Detroit, which is not the best side. And but I didn't know that. I thought it was fine. I had a lot of fun. And anyway, so I'm just a kid that grew up in Detroit, and I was like most people. And but when I went to live with my aunt, who was a great positive influence on me, she was a wonderful woman. And although I did not appreciate it at the time, or certainly did not understand the great wisdom that this woman had and what she was trying to do in molding my character and my interests, I look back on it now and I just say, "Oh my God, how fortunate I am to have had that experience." So anyway, so as because of that, I had a chance to straighten up, and I had brothers and sisters, and they didn't fare so well as I did, and unfortunately, I never got to know them really well, and I didn't even know my parents really well after that removal of the environment. So I came up being raised by a school teacher, okay, and she was an English teacher, and she used to teach me things that I didn't understand, but in later life I remember. For example, I'll just jump to the chase. One of the most powerful things Auntie would say to me on occasion was something like this. I have the courage to stand and fight, but I am too cowardly to surrender. Now, I'm a kid trying to figure out what does that mean? Too cowardly to surrender. It wasn't until I became grown, had a family, and began to be aware of what's going on in the bloody world and how our systems that we've been raised to respect and revere actually were facades. And I didn't know it at the time. And I realize now, especially, I think anybody can see in today's world where we're headed because we're practically there. And it's not a pleasant world. And it's if you surrender to it, you're not going to be happy. I mean, even in spite of, I noticed on your intro, you had Klaus Schwab just put up there on the screen saying, in the future, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Ha, 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 yeah. Well, you will not be happy. You'll be happy to have bread to eat and drink some water, maybe, but that's about it. So anyway, to make a long story short, I had a good chance to do something. I went to the university. I was able to win a scholarship, which helped to pay for it. I worked my way through college as a radio announcer, actually, at the radio station at the University of Michigan. It was WUOM. So I applied. When I got there, I had to have a job. I was busting dishes for a sorority house. And I thought, well, I can do better than this.
That couldn't have been that bad a gig.
Well, there are a couple of sharp-looking girls. A couple of sharp-looking girls
dog,
there,
you Edward, you slide dog.
I know. I snuck in there.
That must have worked out pretty well. Go ahead. I didn't mean to step on you.
No, I just bust a lot of dishes is all I did.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So I got this job, this cushy job at the university radio station.
Yep.
And that was good because that. I don't want to bore you with all this, but
that's not boring.
As a kid, after I made that transition into my aunt's environment, I became a child actor, quite by accident. In Detroit, we had some big radio programs like the Lone Ranger, for example, the Hermit's Cave and the Ford Theater. And for some reason, I just happened to be aware that they were having, this is in Detroit, they were having on Saturdays special classes for students that wanted to volunteer and just come on their own and learn about radio. Now, radio was a big thing. Television hadn't been invented yet. So if you wanted to find out about microphones and how drama, like the Lone Ranger, would how produced and so forth, come in on Saturday and we'll show you how to do it. Well, I went in one day, that first Saturday, I heard about that. I bust halfway across town to get there, got there to the Department of Education for Detroit, and one of the top floor, they had a huge top floor made into a studio, a radio studio. And so I got there and there were about 250 kids all crammed into this huge studio. And I'm in the back standing against the wall, and somebody's up at the front saying, now this is a microphone and you speak into it this way and you hold your script just this lengthwise to get the distance between your lips and the microphone. That's the correct distance. And the guy up in the window, when he throws it, points at you, that means start. And when he cuts your throat, that means stop. All these symbols, you know.
Very,
oh, this is interesting. So I'm just a kid. I'm looking, this is great. So then the next Saturday I went back. Well, this time the crowd had thinned a little bit because I had a chair. I could sit down and had more instruction. And the following Sunday came back. Well, there were fewer kids. And the next Sunday, even fewer. And finally, by the end of that session, I think it was about a 12-week session, there were about 6 of us or 7 of us that survived the whole thing. And naturally, when any of these radio stations in Detroit needed some little punk to read the script, and like the Lone Ranger, gee, Dad, here come the Indians, I would step up and try out for the job and usually got the role. So I was an intolerable little brat. I'm sure I was. And I was a radio actor.
That couldn't have helped it couldn't have hurt with your popularity at the university, though. You're in the sorority house doing dishes. Now you're a radio star.
Yeah, I'm a radio star.
That must have really gone. That really, I can't say that hurt you.
Well, I did have a sort of a career because as I grew older, I go to high school. I got I tried out for and I won the contest, you might say. I had my own radio show on Saturday on NBC called Make Way for Youth. The Don Large Youth Chorus, Orchestra. There was drama. We did a little event. And I was the teenage, quote, master of ceremonies. And I had my name on Billboard and all that stuff. I thought I was really making it big. So naturally, when I went to school, what do I enroll in? But communications and drama, right? I want to be an actor or a writer or something, like that. And so that was my path. And
well, your aunt and your grandmother must have been extremely proud of you. Did your aunt ever get to read any of your books while she was still here?
Let me think about that. That's a good question. The answer is no, because they all came afterwards. Yeah,
disappointing because I'm sure that she was already extremely proud of you. But of course, your success as an author is something I'm sure that she would be ridiculously proud of after the effort she put into you, and that years later you comprehended. Because of course, many of us didn't really, when we were younger, none of us really thought about what people around us were trying to help us or trying to mold us in a positive way. I'm sure we all pushed back in our own way because we didn't really comprehend it. We were too busy, acting like little assholes, I guess. We all thought we knew more than we did. You find out the older they get, the less you know.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah,
and
it's
the less you know,
more time.
The less you know, the more you know, because you know you don't know, and that's a big step forward.
Yeah,
but, anyway, it's babbling on. How did all this happen?
Yeah.
So here I am, going to be a big film producer or something like that. I don't know. Wasn't sure. Went into the military, and because I had been hanging around radio stations as a young guy, I had the vernacular. I heard the engineers talking, and they would talk about rheostats and vacuum tubes and things. So when I went in the military, I guess I did this IQ test, and it sounded like I knew what I was talking about because I knew what a vacuum tube was or a resistor or something like that. So they made me, they sent me to radar school to repair radar systems and maintain them. And so I thought that was at the end of the Korean War. Thank God it was the end of it. And so my whole team that I was in as a student was packaged up and sent up to the dew line up in Alaska and the top of the world where it gets really cold. And
not
I
a,
thought
not
I
a
didn't
great
want to go there.
deployment, though.
But that's where all these radar systems were up there,
Yeah.
and somebody had to maintain them. So that's where I was headed. And then I got the call about 5 days before shipping out. And they said, no, we want you to stay and be an instructor. We need an instructor. I said, you want me as an instructor? Yes, sir. Okay, well, I was an instructor. Okay, that was good. I didn't have to go to the dew line. Okay, I'm instructing the next team on how to do all this stuff. And I'm walking down Fort Bliss one day, and I see this colonel approaching me, and I'm saluting, of course. And I'm an NCO. I'm not an officer or anything. I'm just a corporal at that time. And so I salute, and I recognize the guy, and he recognized me. He says, "Hey, Ed." I said, "Hey, Mike." Yeah. And he was a agent for actors when I was working for WWJ TV in Detroit as an assistant director and in television. And so we recognized each other. He said, "Let's have some coffee." Okay, fine. Okay, Mike. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm fixing radar systems." He says, "I need you working over in my group." Where are you working, Mike? He said, "Well, I'm in charge of the entertainment centers for the camp, for the whole fort. They had three of them. It was a big fort. There was three places, three buildings, and that's where all the soldiers went on their time off to play games or read a book or make something in crafts or something like that." And he says, I need somebody that knows what goes on. And I said, "Well, they got me, I'm a wirehead now." And they said, "Well, see what I can do." Well, blow me down. But about 4 days later, I got transferred to his department as his assistant. And now this plot thickens. About another 4 days, he gets transferred to the swamps of Louisiana. He must have done something bad. I don't know. So all of a sudden, here I am in charge of the whole bloody thing, and no officer. Well, they replaced him with some lieutenant that didn't know what end was up. So he had a good old time while I did all the work. And that's how I fought the war, you might say. And I was, repairing radar sets, and then I was having fun. And I'm embarrassed to tell you this. It was not my plan, but that's the way it worked out. So in that process in that job, I had to arrange audiences for USO tours. And one of the tours came through, was headed by Raymond Burr. Now, at that time, Raymond Burr was fairly well known, Old Ironsides, the part he played. Yeah. But his biggest movie at that time was Rear Window. He played the heavy in the Rear Window. And so everybody knew Raymond Burr. And he came over with his little crew of 3 people, a couple of singers and dancers, and we put on a skit. And my job was to prepare the stage. It was an outdoor stage, and get the lights and put the banners up and get all the bleachers up and the PA system and make sure everybody came and knew about the event. And then, of course, we had to rehearse the event, and I had to get all the props and all that sort of thing, which is something I knew how to do. And so when it was all over, I had to take Raymond Burr back into El Paso, Texas, to the hotel where he was staying. And so I did. And he said, "Well, come on and have a drink. Would you like a drink?" "Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ray." So we go in the bar, and I find out that Ray really knew how to drink. He was putting it down pretty fast. But it didn't take long before Raymond Burr was saying, "Well, what are you going to do when you get out of this man's army? You ought to come to Hollywood. I'll fix you up. I'll put you in touch with the right people, I said, "You were going to do that?" count me
Yeah, I
in.
was
So I got
in
his
Perry
business.
Mason with Raymond Burr a couple of times. Like, always some minor role, couple of lines of speaking. Usually henchman number one or bad guy number two.
Yeah, yeah,
I never
that's it.
actually had a title. I could get killed off very quickly.
Yeah. So you got me going. You got to pay the penalty now. So I put his card in. Well, fortunately, I was coming to the end of my enlistment.
Mhm.
So it was about a month later, or maybe 6 weeks later, I'm out of the Army.
Uh-huh.
And so where do I go? I get in my little jalopy and I drive to Hollywood. And I
Gotcha.
check into a motel and I get the card out and call this number. And sure enough, Raymond Burr answers the phone. Hey, Ray, this is Ed Griffin. Long silence. Who? Ed Griffin. Remember the USO tour in El Paso, Texas? Who? Oh, yeah. Oh, hi, Ed. And I said, well, you invited me over to have lunch or something when I got out of the Army, and here I am. And he said, oh, well, okay, well, come over for lunch. So that was the next day. I went over, had lunch with Raymond Burr, and he showed me around this. He was doing some sound effects on a movie at that particular time. And he said, well, we'll get together. Well, that's the last time I ever heard from Raymond Burr.
Yeah.
And but now I'm in Hollywood. now, it didn't make any difference because I was going to break Hollywood apart anyway. I knew that. They were waiting for my talent, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, I wasn't there very long. By this time, I've got this beautiful girl, the prettiest student nurse on campus. I married her, and I've got one baby already kicking around, and the second one on the way. And I've got to think about providing some livelihood for this family I've created. And I thought, what? I had to go to work and earn some money. So, make a long story short, I discovered that there were a lot of young people in Hollywood with much greater talent than mine that were wasting their lives bussing tables,
Yeah.
washing cars, so they'd be free to take the big offering for the big part. And they were wasting their lives. And they're getting into a very corrupt culture anyway. And I recognize there's a big drug culture and a lot of other things that didn't appeal to me at all. And I decided that I was in the wrong business. And now I had to become a man and support a family and do something serious. So that changed everything. And I did the rounds. I got a job with a big insurance company as an underwriter. And I was a trainee, of course. But I decided I would climb the ladder of the big corporation instead. And this was one of the big insurance companies in the world. And I picked it primarily because I looked at the chief executives in the group insurance department, which was corporate insurance for companies that wanted to provide insurance for employees. And that was my specialty, underwriting those things. And I looked at the chief executives, and they were all old guys. I mean, old. They were all over 40. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, over 40. Yeah, they were ready to crawl into the grave.
They were through, brother. So I thought, well, it'll be 5 or 6 years or something like that. They'll be dropping off the other end, and the company will be looking for new blood in my category. So if I do a really good job, I'm going to be president of this insurance company in a few years if I just buckle down. And so my strategy was all planned. And I was on that ladder. I'm telling you, I was really working hard for it. And actually, I think I might have gone up the ladder a little bit further, but it's a good thing I didn't because it was a hard drinking group of people. And especially the group insurance departments, you had to take the corporate leaders out to lunches all the time and buy them lunches and a couple of martinis. The first thing you know, you're in a bad shape. And I would have been dead by the time I was 40 for sure. But anyway, at the moment it seemed like a good deal. It was a cushy job. And okay, now I'm coming out of the dark. It was in that stage of my evolution. I'm bouncing from one thing to the other. I have no direction anymore. I just see what the world is offering. And I came across a pamphlet written by a college professor in some small university, Midwestern university. I still have it in my file somewhere. Anyway, the title of the pamphlet was something about the truth about the United Nations. Oof. And it was about a 64-page booklet. And it made it very clear that everything that I had been told about the United Nations in school was not true, that it was just the opposite. Well, I didn't believe that. I thought, this is garbage. I mean, I understood the United Nations. I mean, I'd been to the university. They taught me about it. I knew that the UN was our last best hope for peace. And this garbage in this booklet, it can't be true. But amazingly enough, I decided to check it out. And that meant I had to go to the library. Now, I say amazing because when I came out of school, I thought going to the library was punishment for being young or something. It was punishment for something I'd done wrong. I would never go back to a library again. But there I went. And I went upstairs to the international department, and I checked out 3 or 4 books, the best ones that I could find. Most of them were written by UN people who were employed by the UN, or academics who were on UN councils. Their livelihoods were wrapped up in it. Like, isn't that strange?
Yeah, maybe funded by some NGOs.
It just might be biased, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, to make a long story short on this, I read these books, and I became convinced that the professor was right. Especially one book by, I can't even think of his name, but he was in charge of the military operation of Katanga when the peacekeeping so-called peacekeepers of the United Nations, which means the military, the killers of the peacekeepers, the blue helmets, went into the province of Katanga in the Congo. And there was a time when the Congo was in great upheaval, and communists had taken over one province after another in the Congo throughout the whole area, just like dominoes. All of Africa was being taken over by communists, agitators, and Katanga was one of them. Except Katanga was the one that was resisting the best. All of the others were falling, clunk, 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 clunk. But Katanga was kicking out the communists, and they had peace. There were no murders. There were no genocide. There was no genocide going on. There were no buildings being blown up. And it was peaceful. It was just like paradise in Katanga. So the world, though, was aware that all of the Congo was aflame with revolution and subversion. And so the United Nations would be sent in as peacekeepers to restore peace and get those nasty communists out of there. That was the story. Connor Cruz O'Brien, that's the guy, the guy's name, who was the general in charge of the United Nations peacekeeping forces. And he wrote a book, one of the books that I got. I think it was called To Katanga and Back. It was a big, thick book. It looked about as thick as one of mine. And it's hard to read. But I read it, and it was the most amazing book I had ever read because he was very straightforward about it. For example, he was talking about what the mission of the United Nations was in the Congo. He said, now, according to the United Nations Charter, we are not allowed to interfere with the internal affairs of any nation. It's against the rules. He said, of course, that's why we were there.
Yeah.
He said, we all operated on the assumption that you have to lie to be an effective employee or servant of the people. You have to lie to the people because they're too stupid to figure out what they really need. So it's our obligation to deceive and to lie. And of course, we were there to intervene in the internal affairs of the Congo. So it didn't take me much of that kind of reading from the top people themselves. And I realized, maybe I've been fed a bunch of garbage about the United Nations. That's what started me. A little thin 64-page pamphlet called the United Nations Revealed.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Everybody has kind of an epiphany moment. I'd never really been a political guy. George had never really been a political guy, but I'd seen a lot of corruption. I'd worked as a government contractor, so I'd seen a lot of stuff from the inside. I'd worked with lots of different operations, 41 different countries. Did Overwatch for economic jackals, which a lot of people refer to as economic hitmen. There's a lot of things I watched, and I knew that it wasn't what it was supposed to be. And of course, you sit on the sidelines. I'm a true constitutionalist. At the end of the day, it's not what we all think. It's not only the UN. We look at so many of the different operations around the globe, even NATO. You look at currently the way they've treated us when we needed a few things. We can't even land our planes at our own bases. We've been told we can't enter airspace. I've never thought that NATO was something we should have continued to be part of. I don't know if it ever had good intent. I don't think the intent nowadays. But let's switch gears here. You went after probably one of the most dangerous institutions when you went after the founders of the Federal Reserve. You know, that book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, anybody that is trying to be enlightened or awakened has probably read that book. I can't imagine how many copies. I know you've published, I don't know what, over 1 million copies, I think, sold. I don't know how many of those have been handed around. Mine was a used copy somebody gave me, and I still have it. But how did you research? Because, of course, it was a very secretive meeting in 1910. They'd already been trying to set the building blocks of what was going to happen. But Jekyll Island, a pretty exclusive, I guess, resort, especially at that time. How did you really get the details to find out what the origins of the Federal Reserve was, and why did you decide this was something that the public needed to know about?
Well, here we go again. It's a long story. And how do I not bore everybody to death? But every little step was unforeseen. It's like, I think most people go through life like that and don't really think about it too much. But if I were to create a line showing my development over the years, it definitely would not be a straight line. It'd be zigzag all over the place. And I think most people go through that. So how did that happen? All right, let's go back and pick up my story where I left it off. So I decided that I had to get a real job and all of that. And then I read this book. And then that took me back to the library, and I started to read some other books. And I realized that this concept of being lied to by authorities that we respect, and many of whom we elect, and many of whom we revere as scholars and teachers and media experts and pundits and all this thing. I got the picture. It took me about a year and a half. The picture that almost, if not all of these authority sources were lying to me and everybody else, that there were hidden agendas. And that was a foreign thought to me, because I was raised in the United States of America, and I love my country, which I do, by the way. But I learned to distinguish between my country and my government. Two different things. And my country was made up of my fellow countrymen, but my government was made up of crooks. And I got to that realization that this can't be, but it is. And so when I came to that point, I said, well, somebody's got to do something about this. And I discovered that I had a crusader gene. It started to rattle. I never felt any obligation toward society or to my country or anything prior to that, because I thought that was all taken care of. That was all done by the American Revolution, and we inherited the greatest country in the world, which was true. But what I didn't realize is that it had been hacked from the inside over the years since it was created, and I didn't know that the hacking had taken place. So I decided I'm going to be a crusader. So I quit my job. I quit my job. And my poor wife thought I was insane. And she was right, actually, because I had a very good paying job. And as I said before, it was all worked out. I was going to be in charge of everything before long. And I quit all that and just drifted off. I'm going to become a crusader. I'm going to change the world. I actually believe that. I still do, by the way, but in a different way. And so my wife said, well, how are we going to put groceries on the table? And I stupidly said, I don't know. We'll figure it out somehow. It'll happen. And it almost didn't happen. Some rough times there, but eventually did. So the reason I'm mentioning is because, well, I did then have to figure out how to make a living. And I quit my job. So that means I either have to get another job, in which case I should have stuck with the original job, or it means that I've got to do something as an entrepreneur myself, or as a crusader. I've got to generate some informational materials that I can sell, or that people will want to donate to support, or I had to do something like that. So I decided, okay, I've been trained in television, radio. I'm going to start producing some low-budget documentary films. That I knew how to do. So I'll take my skills out and I'll repolish them and say, I'm going to produce some films. So I did. I produced a lot of very low-budget little documentaries, we call them. They're not like the documentaries of today. But anyway, so, and one of the topics I decided I was going to work on is inflation. I thought, isn't that an interesting topic? What happened to the dollar? I was aware at that time that the dollar was holding nice and steady for a long period of time. And then all of a sudden, along about World War II, World War I started and World War II got into wars, and we started into something called debt to pay for these extravagant expenses, not only wars, but, welfare and got to take care of people, and got to take care of the sick and the old and the feeble. And so they were playing on my heartstrings, and I hadn't yet figured out ideology. No ideology yet in my life. All I knew was what was good and what was bad, the good guys and the bad guys. So I decided I would produce some documentaries, and one of them was going to be on inflation. What is the cause of inflation? So back to the library I went, and I started checking out books, and I started ordering books that were not in the library, and I started giving lectures, free lectures to groups that wanted to hear me talk on any topic that I had a couple of them I was specializing in. But I got to talking about inflation. I discovered that inflation was caused by something called a central bank or Federal Reserve System in the case of America. And I thought that was intriguing. So I acquired a couple of banker boxes full of booklets, papers, documents, recordings. I was recording a lot of presentations, live presentations. I'd purchased some expensive audio gear. I would be at every one of these meetings in town with my earphones there and the microphone up, and I'm recording and editing and having a lot of fun and learning as I go. And so there I was building this vault of information on the Federal Reserve System, not intending to do that, but simply because that's where I was led. And I remember giving a course, a speech, a free speech. Of course, most of them were free, to a group in Pasadena. We've all heard of the little old lady in Pasadena. Well, I ran into a real one for sure at that time. I've forgotten her name, but she was a widow, and her husband had left quite a comfortable estate for her. I remember looking at a car she had in the garage. I've forgotten what it was, but it was an old car, but it was practically brand new. And I think it had 850 miles on it or something like that.
Wow.
And it was already a beautiful, ready for a car collector, And anyway, so I was speaking at her group in her home. I think there were about 40 people that day in her living room. And her topic was that she wanted me to talk on was taxes. And I remember telling her, and I said, well, I don't know much about taxes, except that they're too high, and I'm against them. What else can I say? And she said, well, you got to say something about taxes. So I said, okay, I have an idea. Maybe I can talk about a hidden tax. And she lit up like a candle. Oh, a hidden tax. What would that be? And I said, you're just going to have to retain me and find out what it is. And so she retained me. I don't know. I think she slipped me $20 or something at the end of it. I was happy to have it. So at the end of that, I remember there were a couple of people out of that small group said, Ed, that was a very interesting topic. You ought to put that on the road. Well, you should never tell a guy like me to put something on the road, because that's exactly what I wanted to do with it. I said, really, you think it's that good? And then, yeah, it was really interesting. So I cobbled together something called a one-day seminar on money, called a crash course on money. And I put it on the road. And I traveled all over the United States. I must have hit a total of, I don't know, 20 or 30 towns, and with this one-day seminar called a crash course on money. And finally, at the end of that lecture, another little old lady came up to me, and another widow, and it was in the Midwest someplace. And she said, well, Mr. Griffin, remember, I'm probably 29 years old at this time. And here's this sweet little old lady calling me Mr. Griffin. I felt so awkward, but I remember, okay, I'll play the role. And she said, when my husband died, we had just a little bit of savings and we put it all into a small apartment unit. And it's my means of livelihood, but I'm in debt. And having listened to you about the dangers of debt and inflation and so forth, I'm just wondering, maybe I should get out of debt. Maybe I should sell this. Would you recommend I put my savings into something like gold or silver or something?
Gold.
What do you recommend? And it hit me like somebody dropped a 2-ton safe from the 4th story window out the window, and it hit me on the sidewalk below. Like it crushed me. I realized, with that little old lady looking at me with those eyes she was so sure that she was talking to an expert. And I realized what a fraud I was, because although I did know a lot about banking by this time and inflation, I knew nothing about the real world of investments. Nothing. So I gave her the usual stuff, well, diversify a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And, don't put all your eggs in one basket, and the usual stuff that people say when they don't really know what their topic is. And I quit doing the seminars. And instead I enrolled as a student in the course for College for Financial Planning and the CFP. And I got my CFP designation, sort of like an accountant, CPA for an accountant, where they have CFP designations for, advisors. And so I never wanted to become an advisor, an investment advisor. I just wanted to learn about it so I could talk intelligently about
Ed,
that lady's question.
Ed, there's no gold in Fort Knox, right?
Oh, of course.
All right, I just want to check, Lance. We're just breaking news. I gotta say this because Lance is going to be filled with joy.
Go ahead.
Don't say nothing until I finish the thing. Pam Bondi to be fired. Trump has informed Pam Bondi that her time as Attorney General is nearing to an end.
Yeah, I'm going to cry over that one. We talked about that a lot on the show.
I said filled with joy.
Yeah, I am filled with joy. At the end of the day, that should have happened months and months and months ago. She didn't deliver on what she was supposed to promise, which was transparency, accountability, and consequences. That's what I voted for.
Whatever. Let's see what loser he picks next now. Yeah. That's one thing he's been bad at. All his AGs have been bust. Yeah. Here's another thing, though. And Ed, you might find this interesting. And I don't understand this. Trump wants to switch to a war economy in 2027 with massive increase in military spending and cuts to healthcare and other domestic agencies to fund it. Not
war
good.
economy. I'm not sure I'm buying into that theory.
Yeah, but
Especially
why
when they start
you
talking
want-
about cutting? If you want to cut stuff, how about we cut a bunch of the other programs?
Don't cut
like all the
healthcare.
wasted money in USAID. Let me go back here, Ed. I just, for the audience, you clearly you're waking up. The more you learn, probably the uglier your knowledge base. You're probably starting to really wonder why we even have the Federal Reserve. You described the Federal Reserve as a banking cartel disguised as a government agency. Can you explain the difference for the audience between how the Federal Reserve, which there's nothing federal or reserve about it, how they present themselves publicly, and really what you have disclosed and uncovered is its true structure and its true purpose?
Yes. Well, that's exactly where I was arriving at that point.
Gotcha.
At my last little diatribe there, my evolution of awakening or whatever, because now I finally understood how corrupt the entire system is. Because here I just gone through. Now I'm a financial planner, and I come out and I got good grades and all that. So I got the thing on the wall, the financial planner. Oh boy, and when I backed away from all that and said, what did I learn? I learned a bunch of lies as a financial planner. I learned primarily how to make money giving advice to people that didn't understand the vocabulary or the rules of the game. And the general idea, now this is somewhat exaggerated, but not much. The general idea is to keep churning your clients' investments from one thing to the other in the name of looking for the latest hot spot in the investment cycle. Because investment advisors make commissions, most of them, and that's how they make their living, not serving the best interest of their clients, but by churning their investments around. And besides, even if those guys decided they weren't going to play that game and maybe refused to accept fees for their advice based on the value of the investment, rather just accept a flat amount. They pay me so much a month and I'll give you advice, which is a more honorable way, I think. Even then, these people generally don't know anything about the corruption in the banking system or the inevitable failure of the whole thing, the inevitable collapse of the whole thing. They're not doing their clients any service at all by keeping them in a corrupt system. So that's when I decided that, okay, I'm going to write a book about it. And I got then finally to the very question that you just raised. What is the Federal Reserve System? Now, if I'm going to write a book on this, I better really, really get it right, because I'd be up against all these college professors who teach money and banking. And they're going to, if I write a book and I make any mistakes at all, they're going to crucify me publicly, and I'm going to come out like hamburger out of the grinder when I'm done. So one of the first things is, what is the Federal Reserve? I hadn't even questioned. At that point, I don't remember, but I probably still thought it was a government agency. And well, of course, you just identified a moment ago when you asked the question that it's a cartel. But what is a cartel? Most people don't know. I didn't know what a cartel was. I thought it was something that they had down in Mexico and it had to do with selling drugs. The cartel, No, cartel is a legitimate word, been around for a long, long time. And of course, it shows up in the field of commerce. And a cartel is simply a group of independent commercial enterprises, all in the same field, who are competitors with each other, who decide to join together to reduce or entirely eliminate competition, even though they remain their separateness, remain their individuality. They agree not to compete on price, not to compete on product, and not to compete on patents and inventions and that kind of thing, what products they're into. And they sort of divide it up. You get South America, I get North America. You produce cars, I produce tractors, and things like that. And the whole world had already jumped into that pattern by the time of the Federal Reserve System coming into view back in 1910 when all this started. And now it was time to convert banking into the cartel system. And that's really what it was all about. Convert from independent competitors and to a cartel group and called the Federal Reserve System. And so it was a shock to realize that the whole system was nothing but a corporation. A corporation was created by the federal government. Now, normally, corporations in America are created by state governments. I don't know if city governments have ever attempted to do that, but probably have. I mean, anybody can form a corporation if they want to and call it that, as long, I suppose, they have to abide by certain rules already established in their political division. But it's still a corporation. It's a private entity, completely private entity. It's not a government agency. And that's what it's just like the banana cartel or the oil cartel. It just happens to be a banking cartel. And they went to great lengths to make it sound like a government agency. And that's the end. I mean, what more do you need to know that the Federal Reserve System, which was given the power to create the nation's money and to adjust interest rates and to control who gets the advantage and who charters the banks, and all of that is done by a private group of people. And they got this power because they hoodwinked Congress, or bribed, in many cases, congressmen. But they certainly hoodwinked the American people into thinking that this was some kind of a benevolent move to benefit the American consumer and to stabilize prices and so forth. When in reality, a cartel has only one purpose, only one, and that's to advance the advantages, to advance the benefit, I should say, of the members of the cartel, period. Now, they may go through the motions of saying, well, we've got to lower interest rates so that we can stimulate the economy. It's sluggish, and we want to help the consumer. Don't listen to any of that garbage. That's all lies. They're going to increase or lower the interest rates because it improves their profitability, period. But they have to pretend like they're doing it in the name of the American consumer. Now, what more do you need to know about a scam than that?
That's a great marketing tool, of course. We're the government, and we're here to help. Some of the most dangerous words when it comes to being, when a government agency says that. You talked about something called the Mandrake mechanism. And I guess what we're talking, basically for the audience, can you explain how does the process of creating money from nothing through government debt actually work, according to your book? Maybe because, of course, lots of people think the U.S. dollar, as George said a few minutes ago, we had some kind of backing. They executed JFK because he wanted to put us back on the silver standard. He understood the nefarious nature of the banking system. A lot of people think that's why he was assassinated. But let's talk about this because, of course, creating money from nothing, charging us face value on a bill they print for pennies, and then, of course, the interest on that magic capital, keeping us in debt indefinitely to the benefit. Of course, I don't think the richest people ever show up on the Forbes list. So let's explain the Mandrake mechanism, and then if you could go right into the 5 main objectives of the bankers, and when they met. And do you think that they met all those goals? Because they set, 5 specific goals. And it looks to me like they've achieved all of those and more on my take. But let's take it from there for the audience so they can kind of follow what's going on here. And what we're trying to do is we're pulling back the curtain for anybody out there that thinks the Federal Reserve is working to the benefit of the United States and its people, or maybe even the collection arm, the Internal Revenue Service, and how it continues to collect. We were never supposed to have income tax. It was supposed to be temporary. Let's go through the Mandrake and then the 5 objectives. Do you think they've achieved or exceeded?
Sure. Well, the Mandrake mechanism is named after a comic book character that I remember as a boy, Mandrake the Magician. and he was quite the guy. He would wave his wand, and he had a big black coat. He could move it around, push, push, push. And out of nothing, he could bring something into being. He was a real magician. And poof, there it was. Or the opposite. He could take something and poof, poof, push, and it's gone. And that was Mandrake the magician's calling card. Truly magic. And I thought, well, that pretty well describes what the Federal Reserve System is doing with money. They go poof, 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 a lot of accounting, there are a lot of records, a lot of long words used to describe the process, got to determine between assets and liabilities, and long-term, short-term, all the vocabulary creeps into it. First thing you don't know what the heck you're talking about, and they don't either. It's funny to read the transcripts of some of these international monetary conferences where the leading monetary figures of the world, of their governments, argue with each other tooth and nail over what is money. They can't even agree on what money is. And that's how nebulous the whole thing has become. It's so vague. It's just all vocabulary. It's imaginary.
Legalese is a tool. Even MIT has studied it, that they say they keep it unnecessarily complicated so that the average person has no idea what's being discussed. It's like the tax code, the complexity of the tax code.
That's right, yeah.
If you keep it super complicated, then maybe nobody's ever going to know. We call it the David Copperfield on this show. Of course, Mandrake is an older time period. It's the sleight of hand. We're going to tell you this is what it is, but in truth, it doesn't have anything to do with that. But if we explain it in a manner that you don't truly understand, it becomes more credible. Well, understand this. I think it's a little too complicated for you to really grasp.
That's how it works, exactly. And I used to think, I wanted to think that that's not true, that it really was complicated. But then the deeper I got into it, the more I realized, no, I was into it quite deep, but I won't tell you what was so deep.
Yeah, we know about how deep that pile could get.
That pile got really deep.
Yeah, of course.
In fact, I used a quotation from Epictetus. See if I can remember that. I shouldn't start this, but it's a good one. Let's see if I can remember it. Epictetus was a philosopher back from way back, the beginning of civilization, and he was a philosopher, and I think he said, appearances are of four kinds. Things either are as they appear to be, or they neither are nor appear to be, or they are but do not appear to be, or are not but appear to be. Now, I got it right. Now, who can figure that one out?
Yeah,
you can read magical. Read it. You got to dissemble it. All Epictetus was saying is that appearances are of four kinds. Things either are or they aren't. There's two kinds. And regardless of which they may be, they may appear to be the opposite. And that's the four kinds. Now, that's a simpler way of saying it. That makes sense. But when you detail it, as Epictetus did, you lose comprehension. That, I said in my earlier lectures that reminded me of a college professor teaching banking 101 with that phrase, because you've got to have a master's degree in order to even remember it, much less how to say it. But everything is really quite simple. And when you get rid of the idea that it's supposed to make sense. Now, you fellas were talking earlier about, well, look at the rules that just changed recently, and that's not going to work. Well, you hear that all the time. How can these people be so stupid? You should know that that's not going to work. What they don't realize is they know it won't work, which is precisely why they do it. Their job is not to make it work. It cannot work. It will never work. But they have to go through the motions of appearing to be trying so hard but it's so complicated. We're doing our best. Maybe next year we'll make it work. They know it's not working.
And I want to point something out to the audience. Intelligence organizations use this all over the globe. It goes into all kinds of basic training when you're working as a contractor and otherwise. But the best lies in the world are the ones that are intertwined with shreds of truth. At the end of the day, that's the narrative they sell. And they have to make it appear like, oh, we're going to fix the interest rates. We're going to do this next. It's an argument. It's a discussion. You understand this is very complicated and we're doing the best they can. That's never been any part of the 5 main objectives of the bankers who met at Jekyll Island, and the families and the institutions. So, you know, you talk about, and one of the central arguments in the book is that the Fed is incapable of meeting its stated objectives, like economic stability. You know,
that's not it.
You've been looking at them for a very long time. What do you think the biggest lies are that the Federal Reserve sells to the public? It sells internationally, domestically, even to the point that, look, the Fed's been involved in lots of wars and conflicts. We know that. You know, the Rothschild formula, if you go back in the history of the Rothschilds, you look how they made their money. The Napoleonic War, selling rare coins to the leadership in countries, and of course, loaning money when, and of course, they were using carrier pigeons back then to transmit information, finding what was going on at the front line, and then they would hedge their bets, loaning to both levels of government. These bankers, you know, understood that from the very beginnings. I guess some of the biggest lies you uncovered, I'd like to disclose those for the audience, for anybody that hasn't taken the time to read your book. And let me say this: go out, buy a new copy of the book, support, Ed and everything he does, because at the end of the day, this is a true teller. I'm going to say that right now. So if you can go over to Amazon after the show, go buy any one of his books, and you're going to be very satisfied with what you're getting, because he doesn't hold back. Give the audience the biggest lies that you discovered. And I'm curious, did anybody get aware that you were going to write this book? And were you threatened along the way? Was there anything nefarious that happened to you? Or, you know, because let's face it, I think if the Federal Reserve knew you were coming out with this book, they would have hunted you down, because they sure as hell didn't want anybody to know, right? Honestly, if you had insider documents right now, the true nature, and you were putting them out, if you were leaking them, I'm sure you would become a target. Maybe give the biggest lies you discovered, you know, and maybe some of the worst things as you were investigating.
Yeah, you've got a couple of good questions that are wrapped together there. One is, I had no idea what I was doing. Otherwise, I probably would have been scared to try it. I didn't know how much voltage was in these wires. I picked my enemies pretty good. I mean, I picked the Federal Reserve System. I had no idea how powerful and completely corrupt and evil it is. I had no idea when I started. I knew that they were making a lot of mistakes. I thought they were just, you know, spamming the American public. I thought they were, you know, legally plundering the taxpayer. That's bad enough. But I never realized that they were thick in their minds all the way down to the core. And I also realized later that they don't mess around. If they think somebody or some institution is standing in the way of their profits or their other goals, that might not hold much hope for those people to live very long. I don't know how else to say it, but the record is full of people who have miraculously passed away because they no apparent reason except that they were critics of the Federal Reserve System. Mm-hmm. And so back to the question, had I known that, would I have done what I do? I don't know. I picked another one when I wrote my book on cancer and attacked the whole healthcare system for the same reason. Now, I picked two doozies.
The medical industrial complex is not to be trifled with. They've been lying to us about cancer for decades. A lot of it's come out recently, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and bendazole. People are curing stage 4 cancer. Roger Stone used protocols that clearly cleared his wife's stage 4 cancer. She's doing extremely well. She's been in remission. And there are thousands of cases online. We know that's being uncovered now. And of course, they're not happy about it. That's why they said, oh, it's horse paste. You know, they did a lot of things and they're good at it. Listen, we got suspended for bringing out the truth. But the Federal Reserve is such a nefarious operation.
It is, yeah.
That's why I just wonder some of the worst things that you found and said, holy shit, I cannot believe this is true. But in fact, it is.
That's a daily event for me.
Yeah, I'll bet. You've
Anyway,
been looking at it longer than just about
have I ever
anybody.
been threatened? The answer is no, which is somewhat surprising.
Yeah, it is.
And at first, I used to laugh about it, say, I'm kind of disappointed. Nobody's tried to shoot me yet. I guess I'm not doing my job. And but I think it's because I'm a writer and not a politician. I'm not reaching for political power. I don't want to. I don't want to put anybody in jail. I don't want to have that power. I just want to get the facts out. And I think my opponents understand that if something gruesome would happen to me, it might not go so well for them because they would be immediately suspect.
Yeah, of
So
course.
they figured I'm an old duffer. What am I? I'm 94 years old now. They figured this guy can't be around too much longer anyway. Just let him go. And although I could be dead wrong, and I mean that dead wrong when I say that, but I think it'd be a mistake if I were strategizing on their behalf. I wouldn't play that card. I would just let nature take its course. But anyway, you never know. I've never been attacked. I had one college professor try to claim that a whole series of my statements in the book regarding how the Federal Reserve worked, that they were wrong. And he used all kinds of gobbledygook language to say that. And I responded as dignified as I could. I didn't respond in an angry way. I took the approach that, well, Professor so-and-so, isn't it true that according to document 774 or page 32 of the fourth version of the Federal Reserve Act, it says, quote, unquote. So I just kept responding with verification that what I said was true. And he just quietly disappeared. That was the last we ever heard from him. So since you're kind of letting me ramble on, I'll give you a little vignette on that. In the early days, right after the first edition of the book was published, I thought, well, now I'm going to be crucified in public because now the book is out. I can't retract it. There it is for the world to see. And one of these geniuses in banking and money who spent their lives studying it are going to find all kinds of errors in it. And so I was on a book tour on the East Coast, and I got an invitation to appear on a radio show and have an interview on what my topic was. I was in town giving a speech on my book. I was promoting my book, selling my book. And so I thought, oh, good, I get some coverage. So I agreed to the interview and showed up at the radio station the following morning. And when I got in there were two people in the studio. And the one I could tell was sitting on the side of the host. He had the big microphone in front of him. And then there's this other guy sitting across the table. I didn't know who he was. So I went into the studio, and I was introduced to Professor so-and-so, who was from the local college. And he was a professor of money and banking. And so he was being interviewed at the same time as I. So I thought, this is my moment where my career ends so soon after beginning. This guy's going to chop me up into little pieces and expose all the errors I made in my book. So we get started, and the host said, well, Mr. Griffin, would you start off by summarizing shortly, in a minute or two, what your thesis is about the Federal Reserve? I said, sure, be glad to. So I went through, I summarized the primary reasons why I thought the Federal Reserve should be abolished. And then the time came for the professor to speak. And the host said, well, Professor so-and-so, what is your response to that? And I'm thinking, okay, here it comes. Here it comes. It's going to be it. I hope it doesn't hurt too much. And there was a long silence, and he didn't say anything for, I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds. Seemed like an eternity. And he finally put his fingers together. He said, well, what he said is true, but we're living well, aren't we? And that was his response.
Yeah. Well,
That was his response. And
of course, you were over the target. I mean,
I was over the target, but I love that that episode for a reason that may not be apparent. It's not only that I apparently was vindicated, and maybe they won't crucify me. Maybe I was right, and maybe I didn't make too many mistakes. But the fact is that here is a college professor, and he had no rebuttal, not even potential. An attempt to explain away all the other things that I was saying about the Fed, that it is destructive of the working class, it's an unfair tax, that it's the source, it's funding for wars, aggressive wars, all the reasons.
Let me stop you there for a minute. I want to make sure we make a point here. You know, one of the things is fractional reserve banking. And of course, we shifted away from the gold standard for a number of reasons. Can you explain for the audience this boom and bust cycle and how intentionally causes inflation, and of course leads you to this hidden tax, which of course, who benefits the most from that tax is the Federal Reserve, and of course the people who suffers the greatest harm because it's a fiat money system. Maybe give a little bit of background for that just for the audience so they get it. Some people still don't understand that what we're really dealing with, this fiat currency system. The founders and framers never wanted that. Of course, the 17 subject matters in the Constitution were specific when it came to control of the money because they already were aware of what they dealt with previously under other monarchies. So go ahead.
Well, if I understand the essence of your question, it's why, what is the effect of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy that is so destructive? What is wrong with it? I mean, we are living well, aren't we? And that is true. At least it's partially true because some are living very well.
Yeah.
And some are not living
specifically
so well.
some.
Yeah. And the professor, I'm sure, was living very well because his salary was no doubt funded indirectly by fiat money. By the time you go follow that through the government and the subsidies of the universities and government subsidies and so forth.
But this is the Rothschild formula. And a lot of people don't get the nexus. They don't understand how the Rothschild formula is really what the Federal Reserve was built on.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And so we're talking about creating money out of something other than an asset. I mean, a physical asset. I mean, what is money? You have to start with that. What is money? Well, we don't want to get into all of that, but there are different kinds of money. There's not just one kind of money, unless you want to define money as what is good money, and that's the only thing we want to consider as money, what is good money. Well, that simplifies the formula. If we say what is good money is a kind of a money that allows pricing of products and services to remain stable over a long period of time, so that people who want to save for the future are not just wasting their lives. That what they save as a dollar's worth as a young person at age 30, by the time they reach 70, it's still worth $1 or maybe even more. So that's good money in most people's definition. And so, but there are other kinds of money, like fiat money, where if you looked at what a dollar would buy in 1910 as to what it can buy today, I don't know what the exact number is, but I'm going to guess it's probably 80% or 85% less than it was in the time of the Federal Reserve Act being passed into law in 1913. So that 85 or 90% value has disappeared. It's seemingly gone into heaven. It's disappeared into the vacuum. No, it didn't disappear. It went somewhere. That purchasing power went to the manipulators of the system, the bankers, the ones that got the easy credit, the low interest rate loans, so they could buy things at actual prices that are below true market if the true market was allowed to play itself out. In other words, there were a group of people that had an advantage a financial advantage every step of the way. So that the purchasing power didn't just disappear into vapor. It went from the working guy, the people that don't understand all this, that willingly pay their taxes to cover the inflation, and they willingly accept the loss of the purchasing power as, oh, well, inflation, it just happens, It's because of their ignorance. It's that the little guy loses that purchasing power, and it goes into the pockets of the big guys that know exactly what they're doing. And that's the Rothschild formula. There are different ways to describe it, but it's a means of legalized plunder of the people. And by making it disappear seemingly in a system that's so complicated that, Charlie, don't even try to figure it out. Just accept it. You'll never figure it out unless you want to become a banker.
Right.
That's part of the game.
We see the power. We see the power of them in institutions and lobbying. You connect the Fed to a much broader agenda. We talk about global institutions, Davos, IMF, world banking systems, movements towards a world government. Who's the puppet and who's the puppeteer? Meaning, do you think that the puppets are these organizations that continue to propel the Federal Reserve agenda forward? And of course, because they control such a massive amount of power financially and otherwise, the institutions that are involved, is it as bad as everybody thinks? Because we hear things about the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group. We hear all these different organizations that get together and they plot and they plan. And of course, some of the worst meetings aren't even in these groups, although they're branch off meetings. Davos, you only have access to certain areas, and other areas there's private discussions with high levels of security. How deep do you think the depth of this is? And again, do you think the Federal Reserve is at the top of it? Because a lot of people talk about who's running the world. At the end of the day, who's making the real decisions? Some people claim it's 150 men that get together and they plot and plan. The membership is very exclusive. What do you think the real connection is here when it comes to the Federal Reserve and all these different organizations I just named, if any?
Well, this is the big one, really, the big question: who or what is behind all of this? If somehow you could climb to the top of the pyramid, where that all-seeing eye is located, what would you find there? And I don't really know. I don't think many people do, unless they're either I themselves or very close to it. But we do know that there is something beyond what is visual. It's easy to say the banking interests, of course. And you could stop there and be right. But that would be a lot of people, a lot of bankers out there. There are thousands and thousands, which is nothing compared to the world population, of course. A couple of thousand people is nothing. It's like you can't even see it. If you were photographing it from outer space, you wouldn't even see it. But still, if you go all the way to the top, there's probably, I'm going to guess, no more than 3 people or 3 institutions or groups, small, very small, maybe family dynasties, that are most influential in that group of thousands. I mean, the Bank of International Settlements would be a good place to start. I would imagine that all of the people that we're talking about at the very top would be included in the movers and shakers at the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland, because that's sort of the mothership of the whole global banking system. And but that still doesn't answer the question, who are they? And there's a tendency for us to say, well, we want to know, what group is it? Are they the Jews, for example? We know that Jewish bankers are well known around the world, and historically their name keeps popping up. And there are a lot of people who say, well, this is a Jewish conspiracy. And you can make a case for it simply by listing all the obvious Jewish names of people who are in very high positions of authority. But if you clear your view a little bit and say, well, what about those who are non-Jews? Are there any of those in those same echelons? And the answer is yes. You could make a list of non-Jews in those same groups, and that would be a very big list. And well, what about is it the Catholics, or is it the Jesuits, or is it the black people, the white people, the privileged white people? Are the Chinese? Those Chinese, or how about the Middle East over there? My gosh, look at those bad people over there, what they're doing. What about those Americans? Look what America is doing to the Middle East now. It's the Americans, right? No, none of this is correct. If you start looking for people by group identity, now you could say it's not Americans, it's not the Americans, it's those Americans who are actually pulling the levers and making things happen. It's not the Jews, it's those Jews. It's not those blacks, it's those blacks that are causing a lot of trouble. It's not those white privileged guys, those guys. It's, or not the white privileged guy, but those who are making the problem. In every case, we have to get our heads wrapped around it. We're talking about individuals, and we cannot hold groups responsible, except maybe in the worst bizarre case. If you belong to a death cult, for example, and your whole purpose was to torture and murder people, and that's one of the requirements of getting into the group, I think you could make a case for that group to be condemned as a group. But that's not what we're talking about. So what is at the top? And my answer to that question is that I've given up trying to figure out the names, because those people all die and they'll be replaced by people with other names who will be doing the same thing. And there'll be the similarity between the new and the old people will be that they have the same belief system, the same ideology. And what is that ideology? It's called collectivism. Every one of these bad actors that we're talking about, regardless of what group they may be associated with, are all, without exception, devotees of this thing called collectivism. And it's an ideology. And that's that ideology that fuels the whole thing. And if you're interested in finding a group of people that you want to put the blame on, look for collectivists. And you'll find that come from all of these other groups. And that's really our enemy out there. And I've given up even trying to make a list of names, because those names will fall off next month anyway and be replaced by new names. But the new names will be collectivists also. So this is one of my favorite points today, because I think too much time is being spent, and deliberately we're being tempted to do that, on what group can we blame? What group can we hate? What group can we attack? You know, if we can just get rid of those people, that whole group, why then we'll solve the problem. And that, I think, is part of our enemy's propaganda and strategy to destroy us.
Well, let me ask you this. You know, of course, the Federal Reserve's got an unlimited pool of capital as they operate as a federal banking system across the globe in many countries. You know, Alexander Putin got rid of them. Of course, that's of course why I think in some ways he's been evilized. I don't love everything he does, but there's a lot of reasons I believe he's trying to do the right thing for his country. I guess my question would be, tomorrow, let's say that you didn't have political aspirations, but you're president of the United States tomorrow, and you're now in charge. You've got the power of the executive order. What would be your decision on the Federal Reserve, assuming that you could protect yourself and not be assassinated like JFK, and your safety and security was guaranteed? What would you do to the Federal Reserve, and maybe additionally the IRS? What would be your solution? It's your first executive order. You're just walked into the Oval Office, and you know what you know. I'm sure I know what you would do when it would come to cancer and the medical industrial complex. But what would you do to the Federal Reserve, and what would you do to the IRS as the collection arm thereof?
My answer is probably going to surprise you.
Yeah.
I would do nothing, because as president, I would not have the power to do anything.
If you had the power.
but I don't have the power.
If you had the power, though, me,
Well, if
I would ban him. I'd get rid of him.
If I were king and a monarch, and I could do whatever I wanted to do, if I could say I don't like redheads, I don't like Italians. Let's start with that. What? No, I wouldn't do it. But I get your point, and I think that's our problem because we're looking for the strong man. I think it's one of the reasons people like Trump is because he doesn't mess around. He's going to, like my old friend that's passed away now. If he didn't like some country that's doing, or their leaders were doing the wrong thing, he said, we ought to nuke them all.
Yeah.
And I really think he meant it at some level. I always assumed he was joking, but I thought, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised because I would think that with as much knowledge base, and let's assume you had the power of the military behind you and you thought that you could do it in a system, I personally would abolish them. I would go in and wipe them out. I would seize all the assets of the banks and the family institutions that control the money, and I would do it in a sweeping, very swift and decisive and brutal action, only because I understand the true nefarious nature. I know what a detriment it is to have somebody control your currency. You read the history of the Rothschilds, you understand this is a Rothschild operation. You understand how dangerous it is to have a group of private individuals controlling the currency, especially a fiat currency that's printed out of thin air. And of course, the collection arm, the IRS, the system is corrupt to the core. And of course, what I'm always worried about because of my background is the black nature of money. When you have unlimited pools of capital, literally the Federal Reserve could print, pallets of cash and move it out. And we wouldn't even know it had been printed. We don't even know how much of that has happened. And they can fund all sorts of operations around the globe for massive amounts of money with little to no oversight, basically, and no control. The nature of what it does to the American people and this government, it's really damaging. So yeah, I'm actually surprised. I thought that maybe you would say I would swiftly, get rid of it. So it's interesting that you took that position.
Let me do an addendum on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
While you were listening, I was talking. I was listening to what you were saying, and also thinking, okay, what if by some unconceivable process, I was suddenly thrust into the position of being president of the United States? Well, first I'd ask for God's guidance that I don't destroy everything.
Exactly.
But no, all seriousness included here, I would probably use my influence as president, which would obviously be very great. I would use every legal aspect of that power of president today to convince Congress to repeal the Federal Reserve System and give them all the reasons. I wouldn't want to do it against the will of the people. There'd be a revolution, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to create a revolution. I want the people to understand that they don't want the Federal Reserve. So that has to happen first. Then Congress will vote for it, and I will execute their decision gladly. But I would use my influence to make that happen, but not to declare it.
Yeah, the tough part about that is when you have a compromised institution like Congress, and George, you and I have talked about this so many times, the compromising the depth, I don't think we have 15 or 20 honest men and women there on either side of the aisle. There's very few. Some of them, surprisingly so, I think, have stepped forward. George, what are your thoughts?
On the thought process of Congress? Well, listen, if I would get rid of the IRS, I'd get rid of the Federal Reserve. If they think it's a king's move, then so be it, because it's better for the country. I mean, we couldn't even get an order of the Fort Knox. Elon and Trump said they're going to do it, and all of a sudden, boom, it got shot down because there is no gold. So where's the gold? I mean, it's supposed to be the country, our gold. I mean, look, go back to JFK. The CIA and the government assassinated, killed the sitting president. They hid it from us for, we knew about it, but they hid it from the public for how many years till recently? You have to ask, what else are they hiding? What else are they doing that's nefarious? Probably a lot of stuff. The one thing that the government screwed the government over was the age of the internet and social media, because there's just too much information out there. But, get rid of them all. We got to disband our government, start over. It's the only way. All the three-letter agencies are done. Congress is corrupt. We need to start over and fresh and implement some new rules and laws so the shit don't happen again. That's what I would do.
I think we've gotten a long way away from what the founders and framers had hoped for, the grand experiment. We don't have much time. First of all, Ed, I just want to thank you so very much for joining us. I'd love to have you back on. I'd like to talk about your book on cancer. That's a whole different agenda. Give the audience, you're working on a new book. I want people to know where they can find you. Where's the best place to buy your books? You know, whatever website you want to plug. This is the shameless plug right here. So jump out there. I want to recommend that everybody go out and buy The Creature from Jekyll Island. Get over to Amazon, or wherever Ed tells you to go, because of course fee structures are all different. Go ahead, go for it, Ed. Where can we get, more of you?
More of it. Well, I'm all over the place. Amazon, they carry my book, and we have other distributors that also carry my book. So you can buy The Creature from Jekyll Island and my book on cancer, The World Without Cancer. You can buy those on Amazon from different sellers. Most large bookstores have my books now in their on their shelves. And of course, our own website, we'd like to invite you there, and that's realityzone.com. It's our online bookstore, and we have all of our stuff there. And so I would say start at realityzone.com, because you'll find a lot of other books there as well, written by other people smarter than me by far. And we highly recommend those as well. So, and let me, while I'm thinking of it.
Give your social media plug too, if you're on X. I don't know where you're at if you're on social media. I didn't get any of your handles from you, and I'd like to give you a chance to get some following out of this also.
Well, I'm not very good at social media. I guess my staff takes care of that, and I'm just wide-eyed in amazement of what they do. But I don't know what to say, except I'm out there. So every once in a while, they come up with some harebrained idea, which I like, by the way. The last time we did something was really interesting. Carlene Potter, who's my assistant in all these things, said, let's do a midnight surprise raid on your office. What? She said, yeah. She said, at midnight, let's just sort of burst into your office and we'll pretend like you're being surprised. I said, well, I will be surprised.
You might be in bed. There's a surprise.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, let's give it a try. It sounded like fun. So that's all we agreed. And so I sort of forgot about it. I work late, by the way. I often work till 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes to 7. Nights are my time. Anyway, that's another thing. So 3 o'clock, midnight was no problem for me at all. So I'm working away, and all of a sudden, bang, bang, bang on my door here. And I said, what's that? Oh, that's right. That's our pretend event.
It was a surprise.
It was a surprise, yeah. So I went over and opened up the door, and there's Carlene and her daughter, and they both got cameras running. And so I'm looking at the cameras and saying, are those things on? Which I didn't know.
Yeah.
So that part was real. Yeah, they're on. Oh, you mean we're on video now? Yeah. Okay. So that was the only fake part there. Well, I knew we were on video. I said, well, come on in. So they came in and sat at my desk, and we spoke for, I don't know, not too long, maybe 20 minutes about this and that, maybe some of the stuff we're talking about. And I said, well, it's time to go to bed, don't you think? Yeah, okay. Well, okay. We did that. This is the fun part now. I said, well, did anybody watch that? So Carlene looks at her smartphone. She says, well, not too good. I said, what? Well, we had 74 people. I said, what? 74? We did all this for 74 people. Yeah. Oh, she says, no, wait a minute. It's 120. Oh, no, it's 250. Oh, it keeps changing. And we were talking for a moment. And before I went to bed, it was up to 5,000.
Yeah.
And when I woke up in the morning, it was 25,000.
Yeah.
I said, oh, all of a sudden I understand. Now I understand how social media works.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us. We're out of time for today. We really appreciate you taking the time out to come to the show. Your new book, when is it going to be out? When will we see the new book?
Well, let me thank you for that. I want to talk just briefly, and I'll keep this short, believe it or not. My new book is going to be called The Human Manifesto. an idea whose time has come. And it came from the idea that all of the tyrants of modern times have their manifesto, their book, their statement of what they believe in. Karl Marx has his Communist Manifesto. He's got Das Kapital. He says, Marx and Engels say, over page after page after page, describing what they believe in and so forth. And people read that stuff and they say, I like that. There's all laid out. And I said, well, what about the opposite of communism? Who would that be? Well, I learned in school that the opposite of communism was fascism. That's the opposite. I mean, if I want to be an anti-communist, I have to be a fascist. Pretty much. Yeah, that's the way they do it, you know. They give you great choices, don't they? Yeah. So I've got a copy of Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. And I read it, and blow me down, it was the same thing as Karl Marx. In every major detail, it was the same thing. Even to socialism. I mean, people don't realize that the Nazi Party, NAZI, is an abbreviation for the German word of National Socialism.
I'm sorry, yeah, we got to go. We got to cut. We're
okay.
You all have a blessed day. We'll catch you guys tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. for the Crypto Power Hour and the Big Mig Show at 11 a.m. Have a blessed day.
Okay.
I might have to let it drop. Said got it through hella big, had to run it back again, get it like it. Said had to bring it hella big, had to run it.
Are you ready to stand up for your community and support your local sheriff? Join the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and become a vital member of the Sheriff's Citizens Posse. At CSPOA.org, we empower citizens like you through weekly webinars, arming you with the knowledge to back your constitutional county sheriff. Together, we can uphold our Constitution and ensure liberty and justice for all. Your community needs you now more than ever. Visit CSPOA.org and join the Sheriff's Citizens Posse today. Make a difference. Stand for freedom. That's CSPOA.org. Your country, your fight, your future.
What if you could predict your financial future? And what if you could trade on it? Introducing Block Trust IRA. The future in your hands. An astonishing 88,000 millionaires were created last year from the Bitcoin boom. And you could be next. Block Trust IRA is the only crypto management firm powered by AI-driven strategies, ranked #1 in the world by Bitcoin Magazine. The Block Trust IRA platform is built for everyone, from first-time buyers to seasoned investors. Predictive AI technology that was once only reserved for insiders and elites is now available to you. It's time to leave the old buy and hold strategies behind. Your assets are protected with military-grade security, offline cold storage, and $200 million in insurance. Visit BlockTrustIRA.com to book your free consultation and ask how to claim up to $2,500 in deposit bonuses today. Bitcoin changed the game. AI changes the strategy.
Hi folks, I'm here today to introduce you to the Prepper Bar from PrepperBar.com, the most unique precious metals product we have seen in a long time. These 62-gram bars are perforated and easily broken down into your choice of 3 different sizes to fit a multitude of needs. Whether it be from asset protection from inflation, economic turmoil, or its unique utility for barter and trade, the Prepper Bar makes a perfect gift for all the precious metal lovers out there. Exclusively made here in the USA and selling out fast. Available in both gold and silver, these slim Prepper Bars fit neatly in your wallet, and their utility enables use in any situation.
Forged through rigorous training and honed by the finest instructors on earth, these canine units serve beside our nation's warriors as they fight to preserve what we cherish. When these warriors complete their duty, the Warrior Dog Foundation provides them with a home deserving of the service they've given us all. At our state-of-the-art kennels, they receive rehabilitation and care suitable for heroes, because that's what they are. Be a part of giving them a future today. Visit WarriorDogFoundation.org.